Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
Welcome to today's program, and I'm pleased to report to you that we'll have a 2-week series on what I would describe as a very humane journey to Guatemala. I have 3 wonderful guests today who have done this in the past and will do it again in the future. We have physicians with us and a nurse, and on their trips to Guatemala they provide medical service, particularly eye surgery and in dealing with other issues in children. And it's just a wonderful way to send the message of America that we care about others. Welcome to the program, first of all, Dr. Madge Storm-Gibson, who is fortunately here in Coeur d'Alene, and her spouse by her here is Dr. Justin Storm-Gibson. And we welcome you to the program. Delighted to have you here.
Thank
And
you very
equally delighted to have our third guest, Mary Sobolski, who is a nurse. And I know all 3 of you went on the trip along with others. And I'm so pleased that our regular panelist, Janelle Burke, is here to join me in finding out about this humane mission. And we will start the questioning today with Janelle Burke.
Thank you very much for being here. It's an honor to have you, and we want to find out more about that. There's probably a number of our viewers who have read about similar type programs, but Mary, can you tell us what was the program about? You were part of a medical team. What was the program about, and who sponsored it?
Well, basically, this is one of many mission trips I've taken with the Stormo-Gibsons and a team of people from not only North Idaho but across the country. This most recent trip to Guatemala was to do eye surgery primarily for people at a facility in Guatemala called Hospital de la Familia, and that is actually sponsored by an organization out of San Francisco. And the Hospital de la Familia lays out the groundwork and makes it so that different teams of people can go down 4 times a year, roughly 5, sometimes 6 times a year, to do surgery and see patients down there. My job specifically for it is to kind of gather the team together and the supplies and make it possible for us to get there and have the things we need when we go down.
And Dr. Madge, what was your role in this particular trip?
Well, I'm fortunate to be married to Justin, who's an eye surgeon who enjoys doing eye surgery on children. So my role on these teams is to, after he has seen the children in the clinic and decides that this is a child that could benefit from eye surgery, often children with crossed eyes, strabismus, or congenital cataracts that are there since birth, that type of problem, I then examine the children particularly for heart or lung problems that might prevent them from having surgery at that time. And usually in any given week we're doing surgery, 2 to 3 children really are not healthy enough to have the surgery that time, unfortunately. And we try to refer them to getting care for their heart or lung problems and hope we can see them in the future and they'll get the surgery later. But so it's fun to be able to work as a team in that way.
And Dr. Justin, you were the surgeon then. If the child presented and was capable of the surgery, then you were the surgeon.
Yeah, and one of my roles, in addition to doing surgery, is to be the team leader. And one of the most enjoyable things is to be able to bring down a team of Americans with me to go and do this work in Central America. This will be the 16th time in the 16 years that we've lived in Coeur d'Alene that we've gone. And this particular organization, Hospital de la Familia, is, I'd say, one of the best organizations that we've worked with. So it's really a pleasure to be able to go down and do this kind of work.
One more short question. Do you always go to Guatemala, or do you go to other countries as well?
No, for the last 4 years we've gone to Guatemala. Before that, I was going to Nicaragua on a regular basis and made a few trips to southern Mexico as well. And actually made 1 trip to India many years ago. But usually Central America, Nicaragua, and Guatemala.
But this particular organization, Hospital de la Familia, only does work in Guatemala.
Right.
Other trips we've either gone on our own through personal contacts in the countries or perhaps a different organization.
Thank you.
I have one question then. Thank you so much for bringing slides. Our viewers through slides feel like they've been on the trip with you, but one question before that, and Justin, I think I'll ask you this question, and that is, we are very concerned about how many Americans that are not covered with insurance, over 47 million Americans. I was just watching a program the other day of a wonderful volunteer in Knoxville, Tennessee, came in for 2 days, and they tried to see 1,000 people who were desperately in need of medical care with no insurance. What is the situation in the countries you've been to, particularly Guatemala? Are there a lot of people that do not have access to medical care?
Yeah, I was just looking at some of those statistics. In Guatemala, about 2/3 of the people live in the rural areas, and about that many also have very limited access to medical care. And one of the nice things about this particular organization is that their hospital is actually out in the mountains. It's 170 miles, I believe, from Guatemala City, so it's quite a ways away. And because it's out there, it serves mostly rural poor who wouldn't have access to this kind of medical care.
So when you go, they come in from different areas for your...
They actually come across from the Mexican border into Guatemala. We see a lot of people from Chiapas, southern Mexico.
So the word gets out that you're there to help. Mary, we're going to start with the slides now, and they are very important, and we're going to divide up between different people. And as they bring up the first slide, I think you're going to do the first 7. We'll take a look at what happened on your trip. If they can just bring that slide up now to get started here. There we go.
Sure. The first one is just a picture of a few of the boxes that we bring down. This last trip we took with us out of the Spokane airport 45 boxes this size packed with medical supplies that are gathered, donated, or purchased to take with us, and that's a huge bit of getting this organized, because you don't go down to a facility that has everything you need.
Right.
You
So
go
take it
down
with
and
you.
you take everything that you have to use, which is a considerable amount.
So we'll go to the second slide now.
That's just a little shot of some of the transportation, and love the picture of the lady carrying the basket on her head, just effortlessly balancing it, because you see that quite often in Guatemala. It's great. And I think our next slide is actually a photo of the clinic and the staff going in, people carrying the boxes and supplies in after our 5-hour, sometimes 6-hour bus ride to get to where we're going. It's maybe 170 miles, but it takes a lot longer there than it does in the States to get where you're going.
You're relieved when you arrive, I'm sure.
Quite relieved, quite exhausted.
The next slide.
And this is just a shot of the very first day, where you can get a little idea of the number of people who show up hoping to get in to be seen, hopefully to be seen, and helped by the doctors that are down there.
Okay, we'll move on.
And this is a great picture we had to throw in because Guatemala could be quite rainy, and that's the same clinic area that we're looking at from the hospital, and just a ton of the typical Guatemalan rain.
Sure, and we'll move right along. We won't show quite a few today.
Right. One of our really spectacular nurses who does recovery for us with the children and comes from Kootenai Hospital here, and she is putting together supplies and post-op things for the kids. You can kind of get a shot of one of the ORs there. It gives you an idea.
That's great. And moving right along.
And this is Dr. Steve Moss. He's also an ophthalmologist who's gone with us on several missions, and you can see him sort of helping to sort through the various lenses that they'll be implanting when he does his cataract surgeries.
Right. And one more with you, I think, before we move on.
Yeah, and this last one is just a picture of, we have a screening team, and Madge is working at this table with Bill Bell, and I think Dr. Chowens is in there as well, an optometrist who helps us. And these are people that are just waiting to give their history to the team so they can decide where we go with them next.
And Madge, we're going to pick up with you now, several slides.
As you can see, the population we serve in Guatemala, many are indigenous.
They need to move on to the next slide, please.
This is an indigenous woman, a Mayan woman, and sometimes actually they don't even speak Spanish. So they use a family member to translate from their Quiche to Spanish, and then we take enough Spanish speakers so we can get good medical histories.
That's
and
very
you could
important,
just move through and see a variety of the children, and these teams do take care of adults as well.
This next slide is really a beautiful one of a child.
Right, probably right before or after surgery. And the next slide shows a mother with a child on her lap, getting ready to have the eye exam done.
The child's looking very concerned there. Isn't that a great
A little
shot?
worried. They are wonderful people. They are so gracious and so thankful for any amount of care we give them.
And I believe we have an overview of one of the communities here.
This is the town, Nuevo Progreso, Nuevo Progreso, and it gives you a good idea of it's a very small town in the coastal hills of northwest Guatemala.
So you're working in the rural areas, not in the cities, as
Correct.
Justin said earlier.
Correct.
Justin, I think you're picking it up here, and here's a group picture.
Yeah, this is a picture of our group from January. This group, we had 29 people. And again, one of the pleasures is to bring Americans down for them to be able to experience what Guatemala is like, and also for them to get a feel for what it's like for the Guatemalan people. And I just love that part of the trip.
Oh, it's just great. Just to honor all those people. What great service you're doing. And then we have a gentleman here in the next slide.
This is Dr. Ed Riley. He's a good friend of mine. We did our training together at Stanford. He's now an attending in anesthesiology at Stanford, and he's been going with me basically since I started going on these trips, and I'd love to have him along. But because I do a lot of pediatric eye surgery, we need to have someone who can put the kids to sleep, and so he comes along as our anesthesiologist.
It's so great to have those connections all the way back to medical school.
20 years ago.
Yes, and here's the next one.
Yeah, this is just an example of one of the group meetings we'll have. This is in the dining room where we eat. We were having a little celebration at this particular time and talking about issues that come up, and also
kind of like a briefing.
Right, or giving people kudos for the work they've done.
Sure. And you're there for what, about 10 days? Or?
Typically, we do, this last trip we did 6 days of surgery and did a clinic day on each side.
And here shows some of the surgery personnel.
Yeah, this is in the pediatric OR. And there's Mary down in the right-hand corner.
Well, there she is. I recognize her, even with the cap.
She's my scrub nurse, and she's also the one who coordinates. You can imagine the logistics of bringing this together. She's the team captain, really.
Right. And the next slide.
Definitely a team effort.
Yeah.
Yes. Next slide is again some more volunteers who are working in the operating room. This is in the center is Dr. Pardon's wife. She came along to help with pre-screening and getting patients ready for surgery. And
Justin, I think there's one more in your section here.
This is a picture of the intake where patients come in and they have to give their histories and histories and stories about what the problem is. And the woman there is my daughter. She's the eldest daughter, Kenna, who is fluent in Spanish, as is Bill Bell next to her. And they just do a wonderful job of screening
tremendous
patients.
help that is. Mary, you're going to take over here again, I believe. On the next slide.
Yeah, I think we just have a few pictures of actually some of the beautiful faces. We had the luxury of having a person who took some great shots for us when we were there this last time, and beautiful, beautiful people down there. And the next one is one of my favorite because it's important to my life. This man is picking coffee beans, and that's pretty typical in the area where we're at. Lots of coffee plantations in the high mountains. And then
I take it, but that you love coffee.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, I live for coffee.
We move on.
Yeah, and this next shot I love because we were just walking through the town, and a couple little kids. They're very shy, but they love to come out and see you and visit. It's just beautiful.
We've done a lot of these shows, and we always have pictures of the people. That's what it's all about. And Madge, you're taking over here again, I believe.
One of the assets of Guatemala is the gorgeous scenery, very tropical, and typically at the end of our 5, 6, or 7 day medical trip, we will spend 1 or 2 days at a lake or some other destination where we can relax and enjoy the beautiful geography of, and you can keep proceeding. The next few slides show more.
Oh, how gorgeous.
This is right looking out over the town where we do the surgery and medical clinic. It's a coastal town. It's very tropical. It's always 85 to about 95 when we're there.
With a lot of humidity.
Yes, yes. A very pleasant change from North Idaho, at certain times of the year especially.
I see mountains there, though.
The volcanoes everywhere. When you're driving up to this location, you'll see volcanoes on the right and the left.
Inactive to some extent.
They're still smoking.
But not active like St. Helens.
Right, right.
They did have a couple of earthquakes while we were there.
Oh, did they?
Tremors, right. You can go on to the next slide, show some close-up of the beautiful flora.
Oh, that is, yeah. And we have one final one.
Final one is Lago Atitlan, a big volcanic lake that is a nice place to spend a day or two swimming, relaxing, and debriefing before we head back to the U.S.
We
Watching
thank you
the fishermen.
We thank you so much, because that really takes the viewers along with you, and I'll return to Janelle Burke.
My first question is for Madge. Are you a Spanish speaker? And is this something that helps with your Spanish ability if you go to Spanish-speaking countries? But how did you handle that while you were there?
Actually, Justin and I were very fortunate to spend 2 years right after our internship or our general medical training working in Nicaragua under the Presbyterian Church, a short-term Peace Corps-like program, and that is where we learned our medical conversational Spanish that we feel very comfortable with. Living in North Idaho, we have a few patients, Spanish speakers only, but we really enjoy these trips as a way to boost our Spanish. After we're there, we feel like we're just getting in the rhythm, and then we come back to the U.S. One of our long-term goals is when we retire, being able to spend 1 or 2 months at a time and not just 10 days here and there. But fortunately, we have a background in Spanish, and we pick up new Spanish every time we go. It's a lot of fun, yeah.
My next question is for Justin. I'm one of those persons who wears corrective lenses, and I'm wondering, in the general population out there, how do people like myself, for example, treat their eye conditions in the Guatemalan countryside?
It's a challenge, and a lot of people are really disabled because they don't have glasses. Now, when they come to a clinic like this, we often bring down a lot of glasses that we can distribute. There are some optical dispensaries around in the local town where people can buy glasses if they can afford them. But for a lot of people in developing countries, it's a major problem that they don't have access to eyewear. And if they can come to a clinic like this and get them, that can really help them.
So that's what a lot of those people would be doing who are older, not the children that
Absolutely.
you had. Now, Mary, a question for you. You were helping parents who were bringing their children. And how did you deal with that mom who was probably pretty concerned about what was going to happen? Or were you the person who was actually doing that?
I'm actually going to punt that question to Madge because without her, we wouldn't even see the kids, and she's the first person they encounter.
Okay, Madge, what did you do with those parents who were very concerned? I can only imagine that there must be a lot of fear about this, especially if you think your child might have something wrong with their eyes that required surgery.
Usually, the parents are very eager to have the surgery done, but often right the morning of, they will be very nervous, just like any of us would be. And consider this is a strange medical team that comes, and you may see them again in 3 months, you may not. So to try to establish trust quickly is difficult. I feel very confident. I'm able to say to the parents, these surgeons are great. The anesthesiologist is very experienced, all of which is true. And I try to allay their fears and say, your child will be out of the OR in 1 to 2 hours, and we have the parents right there waiting for the children. The children go right with the mothers and fathers to the recovery room. So we really try to encourage the parents to be as involved as they can be. And most of them are pretty quickly reassured, but sometimes it's an only child, or they're one little girl and all the rest are little boys, and there's just, they just have the normal concerns. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll start with Justin on this. In that, I know that you can only see so many patients, and that must be rewarding but frustrating that you have to leave and there are others to see. How many can you take care of within that period of time that you're there usually?
Well, because we have a team of people who come with us, we can actually take care of quite a few. This last trip in January, we had 2 optometrists in addition to the 4 surgeons that were there. And so we saw about 465, 480 patients in the clinic in that 6-day period, and we did 165 surgeries. among our team. And so that's quite a
It
bit of
is.
work to get done in the 6 days that we had of.
And as you indicated earlier, you have other teams coming in at other times. So in a 12-month period, it would be really a significant, well, that was already significant, but it'd even be more.
Well, in addition, there are 3 full-time Guatemalan primary care general practice doctors who work all year round. And so they see, that's one of the great things about this organization is they've got doctors right there that are Guatemalan on the ground that see patients all year round. And when they see patients who have cataracts or strabismus or other kind of eye problems, they refer them to, and tell them to come back when the next team comes through. And we have teams, as Mary mentioned, there are general teams that come through 4 times a year. And in addition, there's usually 2 or 3 just eye teams like ourselves.
And when you go back, do you get to visit with some of the patients you had before and see their progress?
Absolutely. They say, are you coming back next year? Because they want to come back for the follow-up care.
What a great connection.
Yeah.
Mary, I talked to your husband about, I saw him at the bank one day and he said, Mary's busy. And that was you were getting ready to go and you had sent him there to get exchange of money.
Right.
And, give us some idea, and he was very proud of you, by the way.
That's good.
Yes, very proud, as he should be. Just to kind of go back and state what all the kind of things you have to do kind of as a coordinator to prepare to get ready for the trip. We showed some of the,
Sure.
what you were taking with you and all of that, but just kind of run us through all the kind of responsibilities you have.
Well, I'm going to say, first of all, that since you mentioned my husband, I think for all of the volunteers, but for myself in particular, we can't do it without our families that we leave behind, because they take over everything that we would normally be doing when we're gone, and they're the ones that let us go. They're the ones that live with us while we're frantically packing things. That the family people usually will help us transport all of those boxes to the airport. There's an amazing amount of stuff that has to get put together and organized, and so what we basically do is get the team put together, and then people come together to help us sort through supplies. Because we have separate ORs for cataracts and for pediatric and anesthesia cases, we try to break our supplies down in the boxes so that they wind up in the right room, makes it a little bit easier.
All labeled and everything.
All labeled and ready to go. Getting through customs is sometimes a chore, but it's usually manageable. But
But Mary, you're not bringing up the personnel,
The
because
personnel
each
are the big
surgeon,
thing, yep.
each surgeon needs a certain number of scrubs and recovery nurses. So
Right.
you have, sometimes it's been 2 weeks before we leave, before we get the last person
Yeah.
for the team, and
Yeah.
it can be because family matters come up or a crisis comes up, someone has to drop out. So Mary's emailing, phoning nurses. Can you help us for this 2 weeks? She's pulled it together though.
On your flights, you take all of your supplies on the same plane that you're on, right?
Generally, yeah.
So you got it with you all the time.
Yeah.
Do you use a travel agent, or do you book all the?
For the trips with Hospital de la Familia, that is booked for us, fortunately,
Through
which
that.
is nice. So we just have to confirm the flights, because we have like one ophthalmologist coming from New Orleans, an optometrist from Florida, people coming like Justin's friend Ed from the San Francisco area. I just coordinate and make sure that we've got the right flights at the right time for those people, and that they'll make it to and from where they need to be. Those kinds of things.
Janelle Burke.
I want to ask some comparison questions about the kinds of things that you saw in the hospitals there, how they might compare with here, both good and bad issues. So let's start with Justin and maybe some ways that hospitals themselves there compare with hospitals that we have here, or facilities that would do surgical kinds of procedures.
Right. Well, if you're talking about this particular hospital, this hospital is fortunate because of the connections with the North American physicians and nurses. We bring a lot of the equipment with us that comes in those boxes that Mary was showing, but also microscopes and slit lamps and things that we're used to using here are brought down, and there's a couple repair guys that are Guatemalan that just do a wonderful job of keeping them repaired. So the equipment and that is actually excellent at this particular facility. However, for instance, we took a side trip to Nicaragua to try to set up a trip for next year to Nicaragua, and it's a huge problem there. In the public hospital, they had a microscope that they hadn't used for 8 months because there was a short in the electrical wiring so that the bulbs would burn out every time they turned on. And so here's a $50,000 microscope that's sitting unused because they don't have any way to get it repaired. And so we're trying to work with them on that kind of thing. So if you're looking at some of the nonprofit groups that have connections to good equipment, that's great, but if you get to the private sector, it can be a whole nother story.
Madge, what do you see in the whole area of children's care? Do you see comparisons? What kinds of comparisons do you see between some of the things that are happening here and some of the things that are happening there?
Well, in pediatrics, infectious disease is your major focus in the U.S. or in Guatemala or other places in Central America. However, here despite the number of uninsured, Americans just have an access to health care that is not known in most of Latin America. I'm not talking about Canada or Europe, but Latin America, where we go, it's very rare to see a child here who would not get eye surgery because counties provide indigent funds or emergency funds. In Guatemala, many kids reach teenage years and still have cross eyes. And it may seem like cosmetic surgery, but those children, it's a stigma. People think they're not smart or don't want to hire them. It's hard for them to get a boyfriend or girlfriend or just be accepted when their eyes are so malaligned. So there's a huge difference in terms of access to surgical or medical care. I'd say in terms of general pediatric illnesses, Guatemala has a level of primary care outreach provided by the government, but it's woefully inadequate.
On that note, we have to bring the permanent conclusion. I've said many times the clock always wins on this program.
Yes.
I so thank Dr. Madge Storm Gibson and Dr. Justin Storm Gibson and our very wonderful nurse, Mary Sobolski, for your being here today. And ladies and gentlemen, the good news is that our guests are back next week. You just can't do justice to this in 30 minutes. We have many more questions to ask, and we also have more slides to show about their trip. And I always think of you, the viewers, and everything we can do through such audio-visual assistance makes you feel like you may have been on the trip. And I do want to praise these three people. This is what human service is all about, and helping others who are less fortunate and changing lives, and it's a wonderful thing. So please be with us again next week at the same time, and we will continue this interview. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.